Good morning. I hope your coffee is hot, your tea just right. I'm wishing you and our neighbors here and around the world a moment of comfort and connection today and every day. Today is January 21st, 2025. My name is Grover, and this is Grover Reads the News. Would you like to hear a news update? If so, keep listening. If not, I'll offer again soon. We've got updates on administrative actions in the first day of Trump's presidency, news on social media regulations in the United States, a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, and news about oxygen in the deep sea. You can view a timestamp for each of these items as they appear in the podcast in the show notes. And with that, let's hear the news. First up, we have U.S. news about actions in the first day of the new administration. Donald Trump signed 26 executive orders on the first day of this presidential term. He granted pardons and commutations of about 1,500 people criminally charged in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, including 14 far-right extremists from the Oath Keepers and Proud Boys who were convicted or charged with seditious conspiracy, and people who hit police with metal batons and fire extinguishers. He issued a handful of immigration-related executive orders, including a freeze on refugee admissions for at least 4 months, declaring a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border, and ordering armed forces to provide troops, detention space, and transportation to increase regulation at the border. Shortly after his inauguration, migrants with appointments scheduled in the CBP One app received a message saying all appointments have been canceled. The app had been used by migrants from around the world who lined up in Mexico waiting for their immigration appointment with the U.S., which moved about 1,400 people a day through the admission process to legally enter the U.S. Some have waited for months or years for the appointment, often with children. Trump filed an executive order attempting to end birthright citizenship, a right written into the Constitution, and grant citizenship to any child born inside the U.S. A lawsuit was immediately filed to invalidate Trump's order. It was filed by the ACLU, Asian Law Caucus, State Democracy Defenders Fund, and the Legal Defense Fund on behalf of organizations with members whose children were born on U.S. soil and would be denied citizenship. Other executive orders filed in the last 24 hours include a withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, redeclaring Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism, halting offshore wind energy expansion, directing the Attorney General to help states get lethal injection drugs to follow through with death penalty, reinstating 2017 deportation criteria, which directs pursuant of anyone in the country without correct documentation, not just those deemed a public safety threat or those who have recently arrived, withdrawing the U.S. from the World Health Organization, revoking protections for transgender military service members that the Biden administration established, likely to affect at least 9,000 people serving in the armed forces, requiring all federal workers to return to work inside of an office, and issued a freeze on federal hiring with exceptions for military personnel and jobs, quote, related to immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety, unquote, and eliminating all positions that dealt with diversity, equity, inclusion, or climate justice, and designating drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This summary was sourced from information at the Washington Post, the Associated Press, and CNN. Next up, news about social media regulation in the United States. Last week, the United States Supreme Court upheld a law that made it a crime for companies to support TikTok as long as the service is controlled by ByteDance, a Beijing-based tech company. Lawyers from both parties who passed the law in April feel TikTok could cooperate with the Chinese government to use the app for spying or nefarious data collection, reports NPR. The ruling took effect Sunday, and tech companies responded accordingly. Google and Apple removed it from their app stores, and TikTok switched off its servers, making the app go dark for 14 hours. One of Trump's 26 executive orders provides a 75-day immunity to tech companies working with TikTok. Legal scholars say Trump's order cannot undo the law passed by Congress, but interpretation and enforcement is up to the White House, even if that means, technically speaking, not following the law's requirements. Trump is hopeful he can broker a deal and find a potential U.S. buyer and avoid TikTok from being shut down on national security grounds. Earlier this month, in the lead up to Trump's inauguration, the Meta Corporation, which owns Facebook and Instagram, announced they would do away with the system of content moderation they put in place after widespread concern that dis- and misinformation and outside governmental influence was allowed to spread widely, influencing the 2016 election outcome and sowing divisions in the U.S. and abroad. Until this announcement, businesses employing content moderators had been tasked with reviewing and removing hateful speech and tagging dis- and misinformation. New rules announced by Meta will do away with fact-checking and content moderation and the barring of hate speech. This includes removing rules that disallowing insults based on people's race, national origin, or disability, and other generally protected categories. It allows users to call LGBTQ people mentally ill or to refer to trans people as it. Zuckerberg acknowledged hateful speech would appear on the platform more often. Next, we have international news about a Gaza ceasefire. Last Wednesday, leaders of Israel and Hamas agreed to a ceasefire in Gaza, and the first phase of prisoner exchanges has begun. The first stage is scheduled to last 42 days or 6 weeks and see what former President Biden has called a, quote, full and complete ceasefire, unquote. During this first stage, Israeli troops will pull out of all populated areas of Gaza, Biden said, while, quote, the Palestinians can also return to their neighborhoods in all of the areas of Gaza, unquote. BBC reports that Sheikh Mohammed said Hamas would release 33 Israeli hostages, including civilian women, female soldiers, children, the elderly, and sick and wounded civilians. In exchange, he added, quote, a number of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails would be released. 3 Israeli hostages were released on the first day. The rest of the hostage and prisoner exchanges will take place at regular intervals over the 6 weeks. Stage 2 of the ceasefire is scheduled to be, quote, a permanent end to the war, unquote, when the remaining living hostages, including men, would be released in return for more Palestinian prisoners. The third and final stage involves the reconstruction of Gaza, something that would take years, and the return of any remaining hostages' bodies. Today, BBC reports that groups of massed Israeli settlers attacked Palestinians in the West Bank, smashing cars and burning homes overnight, and Israel's armed forces attacked the town of Jenin in the West Bank, including a refugee camp, killing 8 Palestinians. Israel accuses Iran of smuggling weapons and funds to Hamas and other arms groups in the West Bank to foment unrest. Finally, we have nature news about oxygen in the deep sea. Scientists report new findings that metallic rocks are producing oxygen deep on the Pacific Ocean seabed, where no light can penetrate. Uncovering dark oxygen revealed just how little is known about the deep ocean. Andrew Sweetman, a professor at the UK's Scottish Association for Marine Science, who was behind the find, is embarking on a 3-year project to investigate the production of, quote, dark oxygen, unquote. Our discovery of dark oxygen was a paradigm shift in our understanding of the deep sea and potentially life on Earth, but it threw up more questions than answers, said Sweetman. Oxygen is hard to produce without the continuous energy that comes from sunlight, but other scientists have also encountered unexpected oxygen molecules in remote, light-deprived places. In some cases, the dark oxygen had been isolated from the atmosphere above ground for more than 40,000 years. It was thought that if oxygen is not continuously being added to an environment by trees and plants, for example, it would eventually disappear. Understanding the phenomenon better could help space scientists find life beyond Earth. Officials at NASA are interested in the research on dark oxygen production because it could inform scientific understanding of how life might be sustained on other planets without direct sunlight, Sweetman said. The space agency wants to run experiments to understand the amount of energy required to potentially produce oxygen at higher pressures that occur on Enceladus and Europa, the icy moons of Saturn and Jupiter. Those moons are among the orbiting spheres scientists are investigating for the possibility of life. This summary is sourced from Katie Hunt, reporting for CNN. Thanks for joining me to hear the news today. If you, like me, know others who are overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, because it's a lot, consider sharing the link to this podcast wherever you're listening to Grover Reads the News, or consider giving the show a 5-star review rating so it can rise to the top of others' feeds as they search. This podcast is also available in a digest format over at Substack, groverreadsthenews.substack.com. There you can listen to only the audio clips about the news that you want to hear and scroll right past the rest without needing to navigate timestamps. The news is a lot, and the stakes of what's happening right now are quite high. We don't have to face it alone. We can do it together. Thanks for joining me here to do just that. Until next time, be well.